Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Happy Monday. It's Jen Wilson here from Convergence Coaching with my friend Renee Moelders. We are here to process HR topics in a segment we call HR Huddle. And we talk about all things facing HR professionals, but also talent managers, leaders facing talent challenges, that sort of thing. And today, Renee and I would like to talk about the very tricky, sticky subject of performance turnaround. Really, it's a performance management concept called can this person be saved, and how could we turn around this performance? And so Renee and I thought that we would talk about this topic because we get a lot of questions on the subject, and then we also tend to encounter a profession that is conflict avoidant and accommodating, where we allow poor performance to persist often. And none of us likes addressing poor performance, and nobody wants to address, things that aren't meeting our expectations, or what seem to be really complex performance problems, or what seem to be sort of definite or unchangeable performance problems. And so a lot of people kick the can. I just say, don't put that person on my job anymore, Renee. Or I just hope that, I don't know, they'll get the hint and they'll leave or something. And so we see that a lot. And we thought we would process, like, why should you work on turnaround coaching? When should you work on turnaround coaching? When should you not? And, what to expect in that process. So Renee, do you want to just pick a place to start and go for it?
Yeah, so Jen, we have a transformational leadership program where we coach high potential people. So that's not supposed to be turnaround coaching. But the interesting thing is that we do a leadership assessment, a 360 assessment with folks in that program, and oftentimes people get feedback they've never gotten before. They hear things they've never heard before. So I mean, sometimes that's not the case, and there are no surprises, but that's pretty rare. So people, it's just interesting to see that people aren't getting the feedback that they need to, even the most high potential people. And so that's really like starts out the whole process is we've got to be sure we're getting people good feedback, or we're being honest about what the issues are, and really addressing them. And we get hired to do that as professionals. We do some turnaround coaching ourselves. It's not easy. I mean, it's challenging work, and we don't do a whole lot of it because it is challenging work for lots of different reasons. It's challenging work because it's not easy to get people to accept that feedback and to convert into new performance. They have problems and challenges that haven't been addressed. So it takes a lot of work to get them to change their habits. But then also, oftentimes there's organizational things that are impacting that person's performance. So, it's just, you have to unpack a lot with those people. So I guess I'm not really answering any of the questions, but those are just some of the things that we run into or we see. And at the heart of it all really is that good, strong feedback that we need to be sure that we're getting people.
So I love all of that, Renee, and agree with all of it wholeheartedly. I was just thinking, there are three C's when we teach performance management, three C's in performance management. One is communication, which Renee was just talking about, and that's like our expectations clear. That's one thing that we just know most of us are woefully under murky. We're woefully murky or unclear in expectations, and that's even those of us that teach it and coach it. We still aren't the best at setting clear expectations, and clear expectations are always in writing. But part of communication also is that feedback that Renee said that people just don't give. And we can talk about that if we need to. I know we've certainly processed a lot of feedback conversations on HR Huddle in the past. So that's the communication C. There's also character and there's competence. And competence is skill, ability, the experience, historical experience of doing things, knowledge. My knowledge is part of my competency. To some degree, the more competent I am, the more efficient I can be, and maybe more authoritative, perhaps. And so competence is another place to look when you're doing turnaround coaching. Is it communication? Is it competence? Or is it the third C, character? And character is my intention or my motives, where I'm coming from, my mindset. And usually in real performance issues, really long standing or significant ones or disruptive ones or really sad ones, there's almost always a combination of the 3 C's at work. There's almost always expectations aren't clear, feedback hasn't been clear enough, there's some character, mindset, motivation issues going on over there, and possibly some skill and competence problems. And so as a performance manager, turning that around, you have to sort of begin to pull apart the 3 C's and figure out what's what. And if you asked me, if Jimmy Kimmel or somebody put a microphone under my, mouth on the street and said, hey, what would be the one determining factor on whether you would take a turnaround coach assignment? I would say character, and in particular, willingness to submit to coaching, willingness to see oneself as they are seen, willingness to look in the mirror and face the mirror, and willingness to really take it on and say, okay, I'm up for this. And so whenever anybody asks us to do turnaround coaching, or if you're considering performance coaching inside your firm and you're going to take somebody on as a coachee, if they're a reluctant coachee or not willing to submit or saying no, not now, and things like that, those people don't have a high probability of turnaround, in my opinion. And we would never have a firm invest money in our coaching if their coachee was not willing. They don't really know what they're signing up for, so I don't think they are fully eyes wide open willing, but at least their palms up, okay, I'll try it. And that's pretty big.
Well, and I'm willing to change. I mean, that is a question I often ask people in the coaching process is, are you realize coaching is going to mean you're going to have to change some things, going to have to look at some things differently, going to have to be open to other ways of seeing things. And, if people aren't willing to do that, it's the whole, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. I mean, you can't really force these people to change their behaviors. They're going to have to change them. And they're really going to have to look at what's working and what's not, because as the coach, I don't know for sure. I'm not right there with them all the time. I do see things happen in my coaching interactions with them that provide me with clues that I can then take that as an example, like a little model situation. And I can say, this is what I just experienced with you, or what I just saw. And I wonder if that's also happening inside your firm. But they're also going to then have to take that, go try it out, come back and say, hey, Renee, I did this, and here are some things that happened. Can we talk about them? And, that, it takes an awful lot of vulnerability and openness to be able to do that. So yes, not everybody's going to be game for that. And Jen, we have, something that we sometimes say to people in the sales process with turnaround coaching about how often people don't turn around. And actually, when we scope those engagements, we don't scope a big, long coaching engagement. We have some checkpoints in there because we expect that we want to be able to stop and say, hey, look, we've done a little bit of this, and this is what we're seeing. Do you want us to keep going? Because again, we don't want to waste anybody's money, and we want it to be a value add for the organization. And it's interesting because some number of turnaround coaches end up leaving their firms as a result of being in turnaround coaching. And I bet our HR folks have seen that when they do PIPs, they do performance improvement plans. I mean, some people do just really get in there and turn it around and make a difference, but some number of people don't. And they end up leaving because of the pressure or because they don't want to change. And I don't know if you have a statistic in mind for that, I feel like we've said it before. And
I do. I usually say we have a 50-50 chance.
Okay.
I feel like it's when they come to us and they're like, oh my goodness, we have some real issues here. The person isn't high potential with a few, improvements they could make, which most of us have, constant little enhancements here or there. what the performance coaching and performance management we're talking about is like, there's some stuff happening here that does not work for us. And it doesn't work for the team, or it doesn't work for clients, or it's not producing the work product we need, or whatever it is. That's what we're talking about today. And in that case, if we're, trying to figure out, are we going to put them on a PIP, or are we going to have them go into some professional coaching? I tell firms we have about a 50-50 chance of being able to make it. And we typically will scope a 360 and 8 calls, but we'll say by call 4, and that the 4 calls could happen over about 4 months, maybe 5, because we try to give people time to process in between calls and practice the things we're asking them to practice. But, we could have, we say after 4 calls, we'll have a good sense if we feel like we're making any glimmers of progress or hope appearing. And if they're not, then we need to stop and assess and say, does this make sense to continue? Because a lot of times, if we're at the point where they need to be turned around, whatever they're doing day to day is significant enough that you don't want to go 8, 9, 10 more months of this process. And so, and if the performance is super tough, super disruptive, we tell firms we'd like them to give the person, coaching as a condition of continued employment, like you have to, court ordered kind of. And also I will ask the firm leader, like, tell me that if we come to a place 4 calls from now that they really aren't going to make the progress that they need, it's not going to be very good to just let them get back and swim with the rest of the ducks in your firm and act like, well, we tried that, it didn't work, but we'll just endure this. People don't want to hear that, and they don't want to see that. Your solid performers to your high performers, they expect us to address lower or poor performers or behaviorally disruptive people, and to get them out of the business if they're not turning around. So I tell firm leaders sometimes, please tell me you are prepared to have them not work here anymore as we enter this process. Because if you're not, there's no real negotiation then. There's no leverage. They're not, they don't get the seriousness of the circumstances. And so that's another thing to just give some thought to. And like Renee said, some number do leave. And they may leave just at the fact that you were telling them they had to have the coaching. They may just cut their losses and bail. And a lot of firms right here, Renee, and we know this one, so I'm gonna say it to you, and then you can pick it up where I leave it. A lot of firms live under a thing when we say, well, they may leave, or after 4 calls, you may need to exit them. Then you say, firm leaders, a lot of you to us, wait, we're low on capacity. A warm body's better than nobody. What do we say to that, Renee?
We make a very sad face. Especially when where you were was people who are disruptive or upsetting, or who might be driving others out of the business, or who are upsetting our clients, or who are making mistakes. You asked at the beginning of the call, Jen, who would we want to do turnaround coaching for? And there is that group. Those are the people that are really causing problems in our business. So when you say that, it seems crazy to me. I get that we're under capacity constraints, but it seems crazy that we keep those people. If we're under capacity constraints, we're having a hard time holding on to our people. We can't really tolerate any kind of behavior that drives our people away. And so we really have to nip that one in the bud. Now, there are also, we do get approached by people who are trying to figure out, does this person have the potential for the role I want to put them in? Like, for instance, a person who's been an office manager, and we want to move them into a firm administrator or a COO role, or a manager in a client-facing role who is going to take over, we're organizing and we want them to have some sort of leadership role in the firm. And they're struggling perhaps with that transition to the new set of duties and new set of expectations. That's probably like the sunnier side of turnaround coaching, those kinds of situations. But some of those people won't necessarily make it either, because they don't have the skills, or they don't have the Yeah, they're not really made perhaps for the role that we want to put them in. So
Yeah, I almost want to call that kind, Renee, performance enhancement coaching or something, where it's not as dire. Perhaps it's not, they must have been doing fine in the office manager role for us to consider this new role, for them, but they're struggling in the new role. That's usually like, I don't know. It's almost like they need a workout coach or something. My muscles aren't strong enough for the new role. The load is heavier and using different muscles. Come in here and build my muscles there. And that's a little easier, I think, for us. You said sunnier side. I agree. And the performance coaching, the turnaround coaching doesn't have to be like Oscar the Grouch, super mean person or something. That it's sometimes turnaround coaching is, we just can't get them to consistently deliver and be countable.
right.
And
management issues or communication issues or
dropping balls, not getting deliverables across the finish line, not meeting administrative commitments. And sometimes those things are not character based. They really intend and want to do better, but they might have some genetic sort of preference issues that have them be less organized, but maybe more brilliant in other areas. And sometimes we're not really going to try to improve their skills, but we're going to find new systems, processes, and support around them to help them be successful. So there's all sorts of different things we're looking for in that process. But you just have to, I always tell people when I'm teaching them to coach, you're Sherlock Holmes. You have a great mystery in front of you. And part of why we don't take many a year ourselves is because, at least for me, I carry them around when I run, and I pray about them, and I think about them standing in, line to get on an airplane, and I sleep with them under my pillow, and they're like a puzzle, and I'm trying to solve it. I'm trying to get to what we call root cause or crux issues. And they don't usually present in the 360 feedback. 360 feedback talks to us about symptoms. And then we have to start digging for like the root disease, whatever it might be. And there's usually more than one. And if it were easy to find, everybody would have found it and fixed it before we got to it. So anyway, it's a really interesting, takes an interesting tenacity and commitment and love, a love, component, because sometimes these folks are not that lovable when we get them. And so we have to love them despite the fact that they're not being that lovable, and really care about their success and really invest in them. And so it's hard
to say some things that, are very uncomfortable. That's the other part, Jen. Coaching is fun and we get a lot of joy out of it. And also there's some times where we have to say some really, convey some upsetting messages or difficult, we have to make some difficult statements. It's not easy. And certainly turnaround coaching is some of the hardest, some of those messages that you have to deliver.
But some of these folks listening to us, they're gifted to do that work. Some of us were placed here to do it. It doesn't win you homecoming queen, but it might cause some people to elevate their performance and really have some breakthrough thinking and some incredible transformation, which is the business we're in. And sadly, it doesn't happen all the time, but it happens enough that Renee and I keep showing up for it. Because if it was really dismal, and of course we have high potential coaching that's really awesome, because you barely have to help those folks. They're all, they're eating it with 2 spoons, and really working at transformation themselves, which is wonderful, super motivated and high potential when we get them. But being a really powerful transformational coach requires a whole bunch of different ways of thinking. And it's worth it if the person's that important to you. If they've managed a lot of client work that's important for client continuity or for volume, you care about them, you've known them forever, or you really feel like they have all these really great things, but there's a couple of really not great things. It can be very worth the investment. Even if nothing else, once you really dig in and coach them and write recaps from the coaching and, tell them what needs to be told and listen to them talk about what's going on with them and what do they think is causing this and how do they think they should shift. When you do that, um, you know, at least if they're not going to be able to work there long term, you'll know that, and you'll know that you tried everything.
Yes. Yes, agreed, Jen. And we would like to see firms make some decisions on some of these difficult folks, like feel like you're putting yourself in a situation where you can decide if they're going to stay or if they're going to go. So you're right. I'm glad you ended that, hopefully. And we do have specialized skills, but also if you're a good coach, you could get it and do this kind of work. Really, you just get it. It involves getting in there with people and understanding what's going on and providing them that really direct feedback to help them go take a look and do something differently.
Yes. And Renee, even if they're not ready to do it, they could be an in-firm coach with an outside coach and ride along and learn that way. So it's a skill worth having for sure. And really one that's special and needed.
For sure. Yeah. Well, this was a fun conversation, Jen, today to talk about turnaround coaching. Anything else you think we should close with before we go?
Just, it's better to coach the folks that have these issues than to just know they have the issues and let them persist. That's kind of a purgatory or something to leave them in. It's not fair to the clients or the team, but it's really not fair to them either. So we should really work on strategies. And I was going to say, Renee, I feel like every single HR professional we ever talk to when we have this kind of conversation can think of a few people that they need to go back and work on. So let's all think of those and see if we can make some investments this fall into the holidays and see if we can cause some transformation.
I love it. Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for being with us today. And thank you, Jen.
Thank you.